Hey guys, my name is Nick and welcome back to the channel, and in this video we are continuing our delve into the Imperial Knight Codex, and we're going to be focusing on the Questoris class of knight this time round. So you've already seen the Armiger class video I've done, as well as the introduction into collecting Imperial Knights. I'll leave links of both of those videos in the description below. But we're going to be focusing this time arguably on the most common type of knight that you will probably find on the tabletop. That is the Questoris class. There's quite a few to get through, so let's go and take a look in the video. So the first thing I want to talk about is the number of knights that are available in the Questoris class. Now, when the Imperial Knight Codex first ever came out, there were literally two classes, the Paladin and the Errant, and that was pretty much all you had. There were no fancy weapons, no carapace weapons, nothing. Since then, though, the expansion has been quite accomplished, and we have 9 different types. Although the Canis Rex one, as highlighted in blue, is basically a special version of the preceptor. So just going through that list, then we have that preceptor, we have Canis Rex, a Paladin, a Crusader, Warden, Errant, Gallant, and then the 2 in red are Forge World only versions, the Starix and the Majora, or the Majora, however you want to pronounce it. I don't think there's an official guideline on that from the Omnissiah. But that's the number of knights that are available just purely at this class. Now I'm going to go through all the different common elements throughout each. That'll be the first part of the video, and then we'll break down each of the different classes of knight, or the different types of Questoris knight that there are as we go through the video. So from a commonality perspective, we're going to talk about each of their data slates. Now, they do vary a little bit in power level, so I'll cover those individually. But from their stat line then, their move, weapon skill and ballistic skill vary based on the damage table as they degrade, and we'll cover that at the very end. But in general then, they are all strength 8, they're all toughness 8, they all have 24 wounds. All of them have at least 4 attacks. There is one variance on that as we get through to the that particular model. They all have a leadership of 9 and a save of 3+. Their damage table then, as they degrade, with 13 to 24 wounds, they have a move of 12, a weapon skill and ballistic skill of 3+. When they're down to 7 to 12 wounds, they have a move of 9 inches, a weapon skill of 4+, and a ballistic skill of 4+. And when they're really degraded at 1 to 6 wounds remaining, they have a 6-inch move and a weapon skill and ballistic skill of 5+. Every knight can take an option from the Carapace weapons list, and that list includes an Iron Storm missile pod, a Storm Spear rocket pod, and a Twin Icarus autocannon. All knights come with a heavy stubber, which is built into just under that top Carapace plate, but that can be upgraded to a melter gun. The Knight Preceptor actually has an additional option here to have a multi-laser. Canis Rex, however, automatically comes with that multi-laser and has no option to change between the heavy stubber and the melter gun. They all share a common number of abilities, the first one being an Iron Shield, which gives the model a 5+ invulnerable save against ranged weapons only. They also explode if this model is reduced to 0 wounds. Roll a d6, and if it is a 6, it explodes. And every unit within 2d6 inches suffers d6 mortal wounds. They are all super heavy walkers, which means that they can fall back in the movement phase and still shoot and or charge in the same turn. When this model falls back, it can move through enemy infantry and swarm models, so you can still trap it with certain types of model, but infantry and swarm it can just wade through, providing you end your movement phase more than an inch away from enemy units. In addition, the model can move and fire heavy weapons without suffering the penalty to its hit rolls. Finally, this model only gains a bonus to its cover save if at least half of the model is obscured from the firer. These models are pretty big. Trying to get a cover save is a bit of a challenge. They all share a number of faction keywords. They are Imperium, Imperial Knights with their specific quest or allegiance and their specific household. And they all share a number of normal keywords of Titanic, Vehicle, Questoris class, and then followed by their Knight type, like Knight Preceptor, Knight Paladin, for example. So that covers all of their commonalities. There is some minor variation, which we will go through now. The first knight we're going to talk about in detail then is the Knight Errant. We've already been through all of his stat lines, other than his power level. His power level is 22. He comes armed with a Reaper Chainsword, a Thermal Cannon, and a Heavy Stubber, and is equipped with his Titanic Feet. As with all the other knights, he can take a Carapace weapon option, And he can replace his Reaper Chainsword with a Thunderstrike Gauntlet. He can also upgrade his Heavy Stubber with a Melter Gun. The Thermal Cannon has a range of 36 inches. It is a heavy D6 type, strength 9, AP -4 and damage of D6. If the target is within half range of this weapon, roll 2 dice when inflicting the damage and discard the lowest. Basically this is your main anti-tank or anti-heavy armour weapon. His Reaper Chainsword is a melee weapon, a strength of +6, so basically strength 14, AP -3 and a flat 6 damage. As mentioned, you can upgrade this to a Thunderstrike Gauntlet. Again, this is a melee weapon, strength of ×2, so it becomes strength 16, AP -4 and a flat 6 damage. When attacking with that weapon though, you must -1 from the hit roll, and if a vehicle or a monster is slain by this weapon, you can pick an enemy unit within 9 inches of that bearer, roll a d6, and on a 4+, that unit suffers d3 mortal wounds as you throw it across the battlefield. Titanic Feet though, which is a very common option when you're in combat, is a melee attack using those stompy feet they have. It's a strength of user, so strength 8, it's an AP -2 and d3 damage. However, the big thing about this is you make 3 hit rolls for each attack made with this weapon, so it has a base of 4 attacks, therefore you are getting 12 attacks with those Titanic Feet. The stock points for a Knight Errant is 393 points, with the Reaper Chainsword, the Heavy Stubber and no carapace weapons. If you want to upgrade the Reaper Chainsword, you're going to add an extra 5 points. If you're going to upgrade the Heavy Stubber, you're going to replace the Heavy Stubber, which is a 2-point cost, to 14 points. If you subsequently add a Questoris carapace weapon, the Ironstorm missile pod is 16 points, the rocket pod is 45 points, and the Twin Icarus autocannon is 20 points. So if you max out on all the possible upgrades, this takes the Knight up to 455 points. Next on the list, we're going to talk about the Knight Paladin. So other than all of the commonalities that we've already discussed, this has a power level of 23. Comes equipped with a Reaper Chainsword, a rapid fire battle cannon, 2 heavy stubbers and its Titanic Feet. Now that second heavy stubber is actually built into the rapid fire battle cannon, so it's not any different in the model's aesthetics as such compared to the Errant. It's just built in as a little bonus gun built onto that battle cannon. Talking of which, that rapid fire battle cannon has a range of 72 inches, heavy 2d6, strength 8, AP -2 and a damage of d3. The Reaper Chainsword, exactly the same as the Errant then, so a melee weapon, strength +6, AP -3 and a flat damage of 6, and the Titanic Feet exactly the same as the Errant. Once again, the Knight Paladin can replace its Reaper Chainsword with a Thunderstrike Gauntlet, can replace its Heavy Stubber with a Melter Gun, and of course can take any of the 3 options from the Carapace weapons list. So where the Errant then is your sort of main anti-armour, this guy is a very heavy suppressive fire kind of guy. So that heavy 2d6, yes, you're going to get those bad rolls every now and then, but with an average of 7 shots at strength 8, AP -2 and a damage of d3, great for suppressive fire, can do some damage to enemy armour with that strength of 8. The AP -2 is a little bit light for it, but that range of 72 means it can pretty much cover the entire battlefield. From a points perspective then, the Knight Paladin is a stock price of 419 points. That's with the Reaper Chainsword, the Heavy Stubber and no carapace options. If you max him out though with that Melter Gun, with the Thunderstrike Gauntlet and a Storm Spear rocket pod, it does push his points up to 481. Next up is the Knight Gallant, and apologies in advance, I don't actually have one of these painted for my army yet. As you can see, I've been showing a lot of, a few unpainted images just to show you the clarity pre-painted of some of the Knight variations. I'm actually doing that in advance of a magnetising guide to show you how to do that. But the Knight Gallant, I don't have an example painted for you. The Knight Gallant is a power level of 20 in addition to all the stats that we've talked about before. However, this guy does have an attacks characteristic of 5 rather than 4. He comes equipped with a Reaper Chainsword, a Thunderstrike Gauntlet, a Heavy Stubber and his Titanic Feet. So as you can tell, he's got 2 melee weapons. Of course, he can take any of the items from the Carapace weapons list and replace his Heavy Stubber with a Melter Gun, the same as everybody else. Now, we've already talked about the stats for the Reaper Chainsword, the Thunderstrike Gauntlet and all of the other weapon options this guy can take already. So realistically, the Knight Gallant is your close combat melee monster, with all of those close combat weapons that he can come with. He can't replace any of those, only the melter gun, heavy stubber options are there. The stock points cost for a Knight Gallant then is 372. If you were to max him out with the other weapon options and give him that melter gun and the Storm Spear rocket pod, that takes him up to 429 points. The exact opposite of the Gallant then is the Crusader, and that's because this guy comes armed with dual ranged weapons rather than a combination of a ranged gun and a melee weapon. He has a power level of 25, which is pretty high compared to all of the others, but the rest of his stat line remains consistent with all of the other knights. He comes equipped with a thermal cannon, an Avenger Gatling cannon, a heavy stubber, a heavy flamer, and Titanic feet. The heavy flamer is actually built into the Avenger Gatling cannon, and this is a new weapon we haven't discussed on this video so far. The Avenger Gatling cannon then is a range of 36 inches, heavy 12, strength 6, AP-2 with a flat 2 damage. And the heavy flamer is consistent with all other heavy flamers in the Warhammer 40k universe. A range of 8, heavy D6, strength 5, AP-1 and 1 damage, but automatically hits its target. As usual, this one can take all of the standard carapace weapons. It can also replace its thermal cannon with a rapid fire battle cannon and its heavy stubber that's built in, and of course can replace its heavy stubber with a melter gun. So just in complete opposite then to the close combat monster, this is your fire support platform. He can take all of the guns and sit back and shoot, but never ever underestimate those Titanic feet. Titanic feet are just amazing in close combat. So even if he hasn't got a Thunderstrike Gauntlet or a chainsword, he can still put out the damage even in combat. And even if you charge him, he has that heavy flamer just for good measure when you do so. The cheapest variant of the Crusader then is 452 points. That's with no carapace weapons, the thermal cannon and the heavy stubber. But you can ramp him up. That battle cannon will cost you an additional 26 points. Basically the thermal cannon is like 76 points and the battle cannon is 102, so the differential you pay for there. The carapace weapons again exactly the same as before, and the melter gun option as well. So you can go from 452 points all the way up to 535 points. That's making him, I believe, the most expensive Questoris variant. We now move on to the Knight Warden with a power level of 23, and again the same stat line as all the other knights. This guy comes with a Reaper Chainsword, an Avenger Gatling Cannon, Heavy Stubber, Heavy Flamer and Titanic Feet. So basically this guy is a hybrid between the Crusader and any of the others really, with just a different variation on his ranged weapon. The Avenger Gatling Cannon, as a reminder then, is a range of 36, Heavy 12, Strength 6, AP-2 and a flat 2 damage. The same as the variant that you see on the Crusader with the inbuilt Heavy Flamer. As usual, can take the carapace weapons options and can replace his chainsword with a Thunderstrike Gauntlet, and of course can replace his stubber with a melter gun. So this version of Knight then really is kind of an anti-horde infantry kind of killer. That heavy 12 shot is guaranteed 12 shots, strength 6 is nothing to be ashamed of, and AP-2 really does get through various different types of armour, and a flat 2 damage is nothing to shirk, especially against things like Primaris Marines these days, anything with a double wound characteristic. The default points cost then for the Reaper Chainsword, Avenger Gatling Cannon and Heavy Stubber is 406 points. If you upgrade to the Thunderstrike Gauntlet and the Storm Spear, a Rocket Pod and a Melter Gun, you take him up to 468 points. We now move on to the Knight Preceptor. Now I'm once again making apologies, I do not own a Preceptor model. I have one on order though, so I'm just waiting for that to be delivered before I can get to work on it. So I have graciously stolen the image from Games Workshop's webpage. The Knight Preceptor is a power level of 23 and again shares all of the other common stat lines. It comes equipped with a Reaper Chainsword, a Lass Impulsor, a Heavy Stubber and its Titanic Feet. So the only thing different here that we haven't really spoken about is the Lass Impulsor. This has 2 profiles, so when you attack with the weapon you choose one of the profiles below. A low intensity profile with a range of 36 inches, heavy 2d6, strength 6, AP-2 and D3 damage. The high intensity is a range of 18, heavy d6, strength 12, AP-4 and D6 damage. So you've kind of got an anti-infantry and an anti-armour 2 version gun, although they are fairly short range. Once again, it can include the optional carapace weapons and can replace his chainsword with a Thunderstrike Gauntlet. And in addition to the stubber and the melter gun, this guy can actually take a multi-laser as well. He has one additional ability over all the other knights, and that is Mentor. Reroll hit rolls of a 1 for friendly household Armiger class units within 6 inches of this model. So to get the best benefit of his abilities, you need to take some Armigers. The stock points cost for a Knight Preceptor then is 372 with the chainsword and the heavy stubber. And if you max him all the way up with the Thunderstrike Gauntlet, the Stormspear rocket pod and a melter gun, takes him to 434 points. But while we're talking about the Preceptor, I also want to move on to Canis Rex, because he is basically a fancy version of a Preceptor. So Canis Rex is a power level of 23, comes with that same Lass Impulsor, but instead of the heavy stubber or melter gun, he is fixed with that multi-laser. But he also comes with Freedom's Hand, which is a very, very fancy Thunderstrike Gauntlet. Other than that, it shares all of the same commonalities with the rest of the knights. However, Sir Hector, who rides or pilots this particular knight, also has a profile. Sir Hector has a move of 6, a weapon skill and ballistic skill of 3+, strength and toughness of 3+, 4 wounds, 3 attacks, a leadership of 9 and a save of 4+. How you get to use Sir Hector though is basically if Canis Rex, his knight, is reduced to 0 wounds but doesn't explode, Sir Hector can jump out within 3 inches before the model is removed, and he is treated as a passenger disembarking from a destroyed transport. Assuming he survives, he then uses his own profile that we've just gone through and his own bonus keywords, and he's considered armed with an Archaeotech pistol. The unit is not considered to have been destroyed until Sir Hector is slain. Now Sir Hector's keywords are character, infantry and Sir Hector. So that means that as a character under 10 wounds he's going to be difficult to target, but it also means that when your knight blows up, you've got to kill him in addition to the actual knight to count as that unit destroyed. He also has an additional ability of Chainbreaker. So roll a d6 each time a friendly Imperial model flees whilst within 6 inches of Canis Rex. On a 6, that model does not flee. But what makes Canis Rex stand out from the others is that he is a fixed free blade of the Questa Imperialis. So you cannot take him in a regular household, he is a free blade. And we've discussed all about free blades in the opening video of this series. Again, there is a link in the description below. But weapons-wise then, there's only a couple that we haven't spoken about before. That's the Archaeotech pistol for Sir Hector. Has a range of 15, it's a pistol 1, strength 5, AP -2 and 2 damage. So that's not too bad. And the Freedom's Hand melee weapon, which is the fancy Thunderstrike Gauntlet. Strength of ×2, so strength 16, AP -4 and a damage of 2d6. So a regular Thunderstrike Gauntlet has a flat damage of 6. This has a variable damage of 2d6. But the big killer here is that if you roll less than a 6 with that 2d6 damage, you treat it as a minimum of 6. So basically 2d6, but it's a minimum 6, maximum of 12 damage. Has the same other abilities though as a regular Thunderstrike Gauntlet, so you are -1 to hit. And if you a vehicle or a monster is slain by the weapon, you can pick an enemy unit within 9 inches, roll a d6, and on a 4+, that unit suffers d3 mortal wounds as that unit is thrown across the battlefield. Points-wise then, Canis Rex is fixed at 400 points. He has no other options whatsoever. Can't even take a carapace weapon with him. So what you see is what you get. We now move on to the Forge World Questoris variants, and we're going to start off with the Knight Starix. And the datasheet for the Knight Starix is not in the Imperial Knight Codex, but it is freely available from the forgeworld.co.uk website under that model, and then just go to downloads. As with all the other knights though, he does share all of the same statistics, but this guy is a power level of 22. He comes equipped with a Graviton Crusher, a Volkite Chereville, and a Reaper Chainsword, as well as Titanic Feet. I've got a fair few images of one of these that I've painted myself to go with my Adeptus Mechanicus army rather than my regular Legio Astorum colour scheme. But before we move into some of these fancy weapons, he does have an additional ability over the other types of Questoris, and that is Imperial Prey Sight. When resolving an attack made with this model, the target unit cannot receive the benefit of cover to its saving throw. That's a very, very powerful ability. But let's talk about some of these fancy weapons then. It comes with a Graviton Crusher. That's a range of 18, heavy D3, strength 6, AP -3 and 2 damage. But when resolving an attack made with this weapon against a unit with a save of 3+ or better, the weapon's damage has a characteristic of 3 instead of 2. The Volkite Charivar has a range of 45 inches, it's heavy 5, strength 8, AP -3 and D6 damage. But each time an unmodified wound roll of 6 is made for that attack, it inflicts a mortal wound in addition to the normal damage. The Reaper Chainsword, Titanic Feat, etc. we've all discussed with all of the other knights, and there's no difference there. The war gear options are to replace that Reaper Chainsword, which is what I've done with my model here, with a Twin Rad Cleanser and Hecaton Siege Claw. Now the Twin Rad Cleanser has a range of 9, it's an assault 2d6 weapon, strength of 2, AP 0 but 3 damage. When resolving an attack made with this weapon, do not make a hit roll, it automatically hits. And attacks made with this weapon wound on a 2+, unless the target is a vehicle or Titanic unit. So that strength of 2 means very little unless you are attacking a vehicle, in which case you're going to need 6s to wound, but that's not what you're going to be using this for. The Hecaton Siege Claw though is ×2 strength melee weapon, so strength of 16, an AP -4 and a strength of 6. So in that way it makes it very similar to a Thunderstrike Gauntlet. The difference here though, you still -1 to hit, the same as that Thunderstrike Gauntlet, but when you attack a vehicle or a Titanic unit, you're adding 2 to the damage characteristic. So if you're fighting and blowing up vehicles or other Titanic units, you become strength 8 with this, but you cannot then throw stuff like you can with the Thunderstrike Gauntlet. Points wise then, a Questoris Knight Starix comes in at a base cost of 475 points. Not very many upgrades available, only that Reaper Chainsword, which can be upgraded to the Hecaton Siege Claw with inbuilt Twin Rad Cleanser. That adds another 25 points, taking you to a maximum loadout of 500 points. So we get to the final knight in our little run through of our Questoris collection, and that is the Knight Majora or Majora from Forge World. Again, you won't find this in the Imperial Knight Codex. You will have to go online to forgeworld.co.uk and go to the model and then to the download section to find all of his stat lines. He has a power level of 22 and everything else is as before with the strength and toughness and the rest of the characteristics. It is armed with a lightning cannon, a phased plasma fusel, a Reaper Chainsword and Titanic Feat. With his abilities then, just like his brother Starix, he has Imperial Prey Sight. When resolving an attack made with this model, the enemy target cannot receive the benefit of cover to its saving throw. And just like the Starix, you can replace the Reaper Chainsword with a Twin Rad Cleanser and Hecaton Siege Claw. So we've got some new weapons that we need to talk about with this particular model, and we're going to start with the Lightning Cannon. A range of 48 inches, heavy 6, strength 7, AP -2 with a flat 3 damage. But any unmodified hit rolls of a 6 for an attack made using that weapon scores an additional 2 hits. So it's like a Tesla type weapon, it explodes on 6s. The phased plasma fusel has a range of 24, rapid fire 2, strength 7, AP -3 and 2 damage. But all the other weapons we have already discussed with the Starix. The stock points with the Lightning Cannon, Plasma Fusel and Reaper Chainsword are 500, and with the Hecaton Siege Claw Twin Rad Cleanser combination, you add 25 to that, giving you a total of 525 when maxed out. So to wrap up this video, I just want to give a couple of demo army lists just using Questoris Knights. Now this isn't an easy thing to do, just to get Questoris into a list, especially if you're playing around 2,000 points. The maximum number you can get in is 5, but you are going to be sacrificing which ones you can actually take. You will get more freedom by taking 4, but then you are only taking 4. So the example I've got here for you for 1,998 points is a Crusader, upgraded with an Ironstorm missile pod, a Knight Errant, a second Knight Errant, a Knight Gallant and a Knight Preceptor. So that comes in just under 2,000. If you try and squeeze in Paladins, they're a little bit expensive and will bust your 2,000 point limit. So you are if you're trying to get in a 5 Knight list, you are going to have to stick to the sub 400 point class really, without going then into sort of the Forge World ones or the Paladin. So this list gives us a strong fire base with that Crusader, And then we've got a combat monster with the Gallant, who's going to be running forwards, giving it all the large with his Thunderstrike Gauntlet and Chainsword. We have a Preceptor, just because it's also another cheap unit. And then we've got 2 Errants in there as well with the thermal cannons. The variation on this then is to drop the Crusader and add in a Paladin. This only drops us down to 1950 points, which means that we can then take some carapace weapons. Now the Storm Spear missile pod is 45 points. It's basically a low-grade las cannon, so that's a pretty effective choice. That's why it's 45 points. But if you want some indirect fire, because units do like to hide behind cover in the first turns these days, the Iron Storm missile pod, with that being able to fire at not visible units, could be a good option because they're not too expensive for the amount of shots they can potentially kick out. But while we're considering our army list, we should also consider our wonderful heirlooms. Now we have a lot more heirlooms to take than we would consider if we were taking a pure Armiger list. The first one that always stands out for me is the Paragon Gauntlet. This replaces any model's Thunderstrike Gauntlet only and gives it a bit of a buff. So the Paragon Gauntlet has a range and type melee, strength times 2, AP -4 and damage 8. So we're already at 2 points extra of damage over the regular Thunderstrike. The big key here though is within its ability list, it is not -1 to hit that the Thunderstrike Gauntlet infers when you rush in with that into combat. But it still confers the 4+ throwing of your deceased vehicle or monster into another unit to suffer D3 mortal wounds. So basically you've got +2 points of damage and no -1 to hit, so that is a definite win. The next obvious one is Endless Fury, and this is an Avenger Gatling Cannon heirloom instead, and replaces your existing one with this weapon. It's a range of 36, heavy 14, strength 6, AP -2, damage 2, so it's already +2 shots. Each unmodified hit roll of a 6 made with this weapon scores 2 hits instead of 1, so you're getting extra hits and you've got extra shots with this particular heirloom. Another interesting one for me though is Judgment. This is an upgraded Storm Spear rocket pod and replaces the Bearer's Storm Spear rocket pod with a different profile. So this time we have a range of 60 inches, heavy 3, strength 8, AP -3, D6 damage, but you can re-roll failed hit rolls for this weapon. So not only have we got an upgraded range from the original 48 inches, we now have a full set of re-rolls on this, and that can actually offer a little bit of a surprise to your enemy, especially with range like that. Perhaps put on one of your melee type knights and you're going to be popping 3 las cannon shots re-rolling to hit, which can actually cause some concerns I think to your opponent and definitely surprise them. The final one I actually really like is Helm of the Nameless Warrior. Unfortunately for me, as I am a Questor Mechanicus player, this is Questor Imperialis only, but allows you to add 1 to the hit rolls made for the wearer's attacks in the fight phase. Really, really good when you're running those 12 Titanic feet attack, or if you are facing a larger opponent and you do want to use one of your big chainswords or Thunderstrike Gauntlets, for example, or even when you're degraded a little bit and your weapon skill has dropped a little bit, having +1 to hit is pretty good. Certainly in that fight phase where this is valid. So if you have a close combat knight, specifically maybe your Knight Gallant, which is running the chainsword and gauntlet combination, hitting on 2s in combat is with his extra attack as well, because he comes with 5 attacks, is pretty good. You could even bolster that by taking a Warlord trait of Knight Seneschal with that guy, add 1 into your Warlord's attack characteristics, giving you those 6 attacks as well. Whilst we're on the subject then of Warlord traits, let's have a quick look at what I would think are the better ones to use with a Questoris Knight only list. So we've already been through these before in the opening video of this series. Again, the link is in the description below. But in my personal opinion, the one to go for here is Landstrider, where you add 2 to all advance and charge rolls made for your friendly household units within 6 of your Warlord. This is just really, really good when you only have those 5 models. I know you have to keep them fairly close to your Warlord, even if you've just got 1 or 2 next to that Warlord model, though, with that extra 2 can be pretty good. That's probably my favourite one out of the whole lot. And finally, let's talk about some key stratagems now that we've actually got some command points to play with compared to my Armiger only list that I did in that previous video. Both of these lists offering, of course, 9 command points. I think the first one of note is Rotate Iron Shields. I think this is pretty much every Imperial Knight player's favourite, where for 1 command point You increase your Iron Shield 5+ invulnerable save by 1 to 4+. The next one is Heirlooms of the Household. This is a pre-game spend. Basically, this is a way of gaining extra heirlooms to your knight. So for 1 command point, you can nominate another model to be a character, or for 3 command points, 2 models gain the character keyword and can have an heirloom from the noble houses. All of the heirlooms must be different, and you can only use this stratagem once per battle, so that does mean that we can now carry, say, Endless Fury and the Paragon Gauntlet, for example. The next champion stratagem for me is Full Tilt for 2 command points. Use this stratagem in your charge phase, choosing an Imperial Knight vehicle from your army that advanced this turn. This model can then declare a charge even though it had advanced. This for me is actually one of the key reasons why I like to use Landstrider as my Warlord trait. So you're adding 2 to your advance and charge rolls, and now what we can do is we can move, advance and charge all in the same turn for those command points. One key trick a lot of people try to do when facing Imperial Knights is to get up high in ruins, where you really can't get involved in the combat because you can't get your model into those ruins because it's just not allowed. However, with Devastating Reach for 1 command point, this kind of mitigates that a little bit. If you can end your charge within 2 inches horizontally and 6 inches vertically of an enemy unit that is within ruins or Sector Mechanicus structures, and that charge is successful, you can make a close combat attack against that in the ensuing fight phase. Now, you can't use your Titanic Feat for this because that wouldn't look aesthetically correct, but you can use your regular close combat weapon, such as your Reaper Chainsword, for example. But that is only 1 command point, and it does allow you to try and mitigate people trying to hide away from that ground floor from you. The next key stratagem for me is Machine Spirit Resurgent for 1 command point. Use this stratagem at the start of any turn. Pick a Questor Mechanicus unit from your army. Until the end of this turn, use the top row of the model's damage table, regardless of how many wounds it has left. This ends immediately if the model is reduced to 0 wounds. So basically, if your knight is fully raspberried up and is struggling to hit with its ballistic skill and its weapon skill and can't move, for 1 command point, you just restore that straight back to its top profile. There are several other stratagems that you can pick and choose from, of course, as well, many of which are House or Questoris aligned specific. But for me, those are probably the key ones that you'd want to be spending your command points on. Normally, you might also be considering those rerolls in there, the standard reroll dice, especially if you're running some errants where you've got those D6 shots, for example, or a lot of your weapons are doing D6 damage and you do need that reroll just to try and get a higher dice roll for some damage. If you are going to run a Questoris Knight only list against friends and family and regular pickup games, I would recommend that you give them advance notice that you are running a 5 Knight list, or even just using Imperial Knights in general, especially if you're running 5 Questoris. The reason for it is it can unbalance the game a little bit, not because they are super powerful, and you will probably, if you're playing a reasonably good opponent, you will lose on objectives and points anyway. But the reality is, if your opponent doesn't have an army that is capable of taking out quite a lot of armour, it does unbalance the game that little bit. But equally, if they go to the opposite extreme and bring 25 Dark Lances to a Knight fight, you're not going to have a good time either. So using a Knight army, in my opinion, outside of any competitive tournament where anything goes, and it's your own fault, if you are playing in those pickup games, those casual games, or with friends, it's more of a thematic kind of game rather than a stomp of your opponent. So in my opinion, if you are going to do that, just give a bit of heads up and then work on your opponent's list with them to try and make sure that it's a fair fight on both sides and the game could go either way. You'll both have a better experience for it. So I guess the last thing to really say about all of these different types of knight is there is a knight for all occasions, but the reality is you probably can't get all the ones that you really want into a sensible 2,000 point list. There's going to be sacrifice there if you want to play a knight, Questoris only knight list. When it comes down to it, you're probably going to want to take some of these guys and then some Armigers alongside. Both those army list examples do come in at 9 command points because you're only taking 1 super heavy detachment with a minimum of 3 Questoris class, so that gives you 6 plus Battleforged is giving you those base 9 command points. Now I do apologise again, not all of those models are mine. I have had to take a couple of snapshots from Games Workshop's website. You've seen some of the unpainted stuff in this because I felt that it was a good example of all the different options. Now, following this video in a couple of days' time will be a full magnetising guide to all of your Questoris so that you can make pretty much every option. There's a couple of foibles in there, but pretty much all options available to you. And I will be making the rest of those options up for my army, and I'm sure I will do a showcase update very, very soon. There we go then, guys. That is the breakdown of the Questoris class knight. As you can see, there's actually quite a few different variations that we can field in our games of Warhammer 40k with those Imperial Knights. Using them competitively is arguably not the strongest forte of the Imperial Knights, especially if you run purely Questoris. Back in 7th edition, these were absolutely dominant and did really, really well, providing you didn't come across a real anti-knight list. If you came across an average kind of list, they did very, very well. In 8th edition, pure knights really do struggle, but they are a fan favourite. They are one of my favourites, let's be honest, as you can see from the poster up at the back and all that good stuff. But I hope you enjoyed the rundown on the Questoris, looking at all the cool pictures and just sort of getting to understand that particular class of knight. If you did enjoy the video, don't forget to like, comment and subscribe, and I shall catch you guys on the next video.